and welcome to the show. Joining me today are father and daughter team Paul Carey and Emma Kocher, who are campaigning the government to change the law surrounding allergy labelling in restaurants in memory of their son Owen, who very sadly died from a massive anaphylactic reaction to food in 2017. I'm then joined by Nick White, co-founder of the revolutionary new app called INGREDIFIND, whose aim is to make dining out a more easier and safer experience for anyone with food allergies and dietary preferences. But first, let's speak to Paul and Emma. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And obviously, we've got Owen's joined us as well, which is wonderful to see. In fact, you've just celebrated a 6th anniversary, haven't you?
Yeah,
for Owen?
6 years since he died. Yeah.
Yes. It's a very, obviously, emotive, sad subject, but talking to you just before, you joined me today, you've obviously celebrating his life and you're trying to do so much to get the fact that he died.
Yeah.
You're celebrating and trying to find ways to change that, aren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very good channel for our grief.
Yes.
And we try to emulate his joy and his joie de vivre. And, he was such an infectious, lovable character.
Yeah. He looks at every picture is just smiling and happy. And so tell us a little bit about, what happened.
So Owen went to celebrate his 18th birthday. It was a couple of weeks after his actual birthday. And he went down to the O2 Centre with my husband Richard, my son Gulliver, and his girlfriend Martha, and our other brother Daniel. And they went to the Star Wars exhibition because they were massive Star Wars fans. And during the day, Owen was jumping out, pretending to lightsaber Martha, and up to his usual antics and playing all kinds of games and really just living his best life. And then it came to lunchtime, and they needed to find somewhere to eat. There were various choices of restaurants down at the O2, so they took their choices based on the fact that a burger restaurant that they wanted to go to actually uses peanut oil to fry their chips, so they decided not to go to that one, went to another restaurant, went to Byron Burger, and they told the server that Owen had multiple allergies. Owen himself said it, but also he was very well rehearsed.
Because he'd had allergies for quite a long time,
Absolutely, he'd had
hadn't
allergies, bad allergies, since he weaned at 6 months old, which had been managed meticulously mostly by my mum.
Yes.
And then obviously handing the baton over to Owen as he was reaching independence, ready to leave home, go to university. Owen had a conversation with the server about wanting some grilled chicken. It was a skinny chicken burger, but he ordered it with the salad on the side, with the vinaigrette on the side, without the bun, because he knew that all those things...
Exactly.
So he knew exactly what he needed to avoid, and he asked the server whether they thought that would be okay. From what we understand and what the coroner has confirmed happens, and witnesses from my brother and from Daniel and my husband Richard, said that the server looked at the menu and said, yes, that should be fine. So Owen unwittingly had ordered a buttermilk chicken.
Right.
And Owen was very, very allergic to dairy. So he ate it, he only had a few bites of it, and he immediately knew that something was a bit wrong and that he felt a little bit sick. So he stopped eating the rest of it, and because they were on quite a tight time schedule, the party all then went their separate ways.
Right.
And Owen and Martha went on the tube down to the South Bank, where they were going to have the next part of the day. And on the way, Owen's breathing started getting very bad. He was highly asthmatic, and that's quite often how his allergies portrayed themselves. So he started getting more and more wheezy, and by the time he got to the tube station down by the South Bank, his breathing was very, very bad. We now know, having spoken to various allergy experts, that when you're having an anaphylactic reaction, it's a bit like a runaway train.
Yes.
And these reactions kind of take over, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. And his breathing got worse and worse and worse. He had to stop several times. And by the time he got to the London Eye, he realised that he was having a full-blown allergic reaction. And he asked a security guard there if anyone had an EpiPen, and at which point he collapsed. And a passing army medic stopped by him straight away, performed CPR straight away. I think within 9 minutes it was really close to St Thomas's Hospital, there were a couple of ambulances on scene. They administered huge doses of adrenaline, much more than an EpiPen possibly could have, but nothing was able to bring him back.
It's a very sad, obviously, story, and thank you so much for sharing, because it must be very emotional still for you, and especially because you've just celebrated his anniversary. And I say that, I use that word celebrated because that's the word, you like to use, isn't it? And for you, Paul, as a father, it must be terrible to even contemplate that you've lost your son really to food.
Yeah.
We lost him for the most bizarre of accidents, and it was an accident, but it's an accident that could have easily been prevented.
Yes.
And it's so easy to prevent it. That's the basis of our campaign, which we'll come on to.
Yes.
And I just don't know how I can ever explain to people what it's like to lose a son, especially because he was the baby of the family. He came along a bit later than Emma and Daniel.
I was 16 years older than him.
Quite a gap between them all. A bit of a surprise to me and his mother. And he was a great bloke, and he was just coming into his manhood, and he was a true mate of mine. I mean, he taught me a lot about music that I'd forgotten about, and we used to joke about. I used to see him as much as I could. We were good friends, and it just ended just like that. I mean, when I got the news, and it was Emma that called me, I was 5 hours away in Devon. And that is the worst 5 hours of my life, to try and drive from Devon to St Thomas's Hospital. It was horrible. It really was a horrible period. And I got there about 10 o'clock at night, and you go into the resuscitation room where you see your son laying cold now. This is the plain truth.
Yes.
To see your son, and he's still got all the medical equipment where they tried to save his life, it's still all there, and it's just horrible. And I just do not wish that to happen to someone else.
Did you get angry as well?
Hugely angry.
Yes.
Hugely angry that such a flippant misunderstanding, a lack of training, a lack of education had caused someone so important to lose their life.
A lack of care.
Yes.
A lack of care on the part of the restaurant as well as the waiter, the server.
But also a lack of responsibility as well, that I just felt like it was obvious what had happened. As soon as we got the autopsy report, it was obvious what had happened, but it was just really infuriating. And I understand sort of from a kind of a company point of view, but the lack of responsibility taken by Byron as well. And things like, you don't want to monetize someone's life, but the amount of compensation money that we were due was just like insulting.
There's no amount of money really.
No,
absolutely not.
But I can understand you go through that legal process, which is very important for you as a family. But equally, as you say, there's no amount of money. But it would be for the principle, I would imagine, that you didn't want it to happen to anybody else.
It took over 2 years before we finally got to the inquest with the coroner's court, and in that process, Byron defended their position and said it wasn't.
And Byron's a restaurant.
Byron is a restaurant, which subsequently went into administration, which is very convenient, so that didn't help. We ended up having a very good legal team, so credit to the legal team of Lee Day. They were very good with us, and we had a very good barrister, and she managed to get the case across, and the coroner accepted what had happened.
Right.
The witnesses, my son Daniel and son-in-law Richard, were key witnesses, and she accepted that everything that they said had happened, that Owen had explained very carefully to the waiter, to the server, this is what I have as way of allergies, and he was given absolute confidence verbally that the food he was going to eat was fine, and it clearly wasn't.
No.
And that's the crux of the problem, because the regulations today, the food information regulations, which date from 2014, they require restaurants to provide that information, and it's got to be accurate, but they're allowed to do it by any means, and those words are literally what are in the regulations, by any means.
And what does that mean, any means?
Well,
I
don't think they allow smoke signals, but they
pictures, verbal, does that include verbal as well?
It does include verbal, because there's special provisions for if it's done orally. And that's what we want to fix. We want to change those words by any means to be in writing on the menu. Now, the menu can be a piece of paper, or it could be an app. And these days, lots of restaurants are going to apps, and maybe apps with electronic databases behind them are the way forward. but it needs to be in writing. Ideally, the actual words. There are 14 allergens.
That's right. There's 14 allergens that we have sort of legally in the UK, don't we, at the moment? But I mean, there's a huge, vast array of allergies that, I mean, you could triple, quadruple that, really, couldn't you?
I mean, I think it would be crazy to put all the ingredients on the face of the menu.
Yes.
So we're trying to kind of reach a halfway point in order to ensure better safety for the majority of allergy sufferers. But at the same time, I think it's also important to have a full list of ingredients somewhere. In the way that most businesses now, catering businesses, operate with a full list of allergens, some on a piece of paper or on a database, out in the back somewhere, in a folder out in the back. So when you go to a number of chain restaurants, for example, I might say, I've got an allergy to wheat or dairy, and then they'll bring out a folder and go through the individual menu items. But I have to initiate that conversation most of the time,
and it's not
easy for me.
Yes, I was going to say it makes your dining experience not really. Yes,
it makes it more complicated. And also, if I'm particularly shy or nervous, or if I'm a young kid and I don't want to be making a fuss in front of my friends, if I'm dining out, and I don't want them to kind of rib me and kind of take the mickey out of me, I might not want to declare my allergies. It's a privacy issue as much as anything else. And if I don't want to make a fuss, then is that endangering me? Is my right to privacy endangering me because it's not there to see on the menu?
Well, listen, we've got to take a quick break, but stay with us because it's very important what we're discussing. So come back and join me again in just a minute. Welcome back to the show. I'm here today with Paul Carey and daughter Emma Kocher, and we're discussing Owen and Owen's Law. So lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before the break, Emma, we were just talking about the sort of ins and outs of, it must just make you so frustrated, but you're doing something about it. So tell us about Owen's Law. Okay,
Owen's Law is very simple. It's a change to the food information regulations, regulation number 5, which allows restaurant operators to provide allergen information by any means, and those are literally the words in the... What we were saying before the break, those are the things you're trying to change. We want that to change to be in writing on the menu. It could be on the menu, a physical piece of paper, or it could be on an app. It really doesn't matter. And we want that to be presented to all customers so they don't have to ask. Now, it's fine. We also want the waiter to ask if there's any allergies, but there's a certain element of privacy and there's a certain amount of protecting young people especially who may be embarrassed about talking about their allergies. Yes, there is that element, isn't there, which we need to sort of take into consideration. If you present all the information, and it's 14 allergens that are prescribed by law, so we're looking at those 14 allergens. Absolutely, you have to start somewhere. Yes, exactly. There may be more allergens in the future, but for now it's 14. Absolutely. So those 14 allergens, if they're in the food, they need to be stated on the menu. And it's either in the words, sulfur dioxide or whatever, milk, or symbols. And we've seen plenty of examples of restaurants that are already doing this. And there are chefs saying to us, yes, it can be done. I was speaking to a chef just yesterday saying, it's not a problem to do that. It needs to be enshrined in law, though, so we have a consistent approach across the country. That's the problem, Paul, isn't it? It's all very well people will do it if, for instance, they perhaps have an allergy themselves or somebody in their family has an allergy. But unless it becomes law, it's always more difficult, isn't it, to actually get the restaurant to do something like that. Yeah, and the crazy thing is, over the water in the Republic of Ireland, there is already a law, the same kind of law that we want. They don't call it Owen's Law, but it's already there. And as far as we're aware, it's working quite well. They're not talking about repealing it, and the restaurant chains are not up in arms about it. So people are getting on with it in the Republic of Ireland, and they speak the same language, they have the same culture as us. So why can't we do it here? Our campaign is simply about changing that one phrase in the regulations from by any means into in writing, and that's really the key of what it is. Now, you're going up to the House of Commons, aren't you? You're going to Parliament on the 15th of May, and it's going to be debated, and that was because you had a petition, which you gained, is it 20,000 signatures plus? A bit more, less, but 13,000. Yes. We'll go for it.
We won't
Who's
quibble.
counting?
That's it, exactly. But it was enough for you to get it into
Yes.
the House of
Yeah.
Commons to be debated. So what's going to happen there, Emma? Tell us about what are you expecting from that?
Well, what we're hoping for is for people before the event to write to their MPs and get them to come up and support the debate. So there's an MP called Nick Fletcher who's going to debate our campaign, but also another campaign from the Edna Naparuz family who lost Natasha a year before.
Yes, that's another
before Owen.
case, yes.
We've been working with them along since the inquest. They've been supporting us, and we obviously have a number of similar objectives. Owen's Law is kind of an evolvement of Natasha's Law from the pre-packaged labelling to restaurant labelling. They've got a campaign that they're going to be debating alongside ours. Now, Nick Fletcher, MP, who has decided to take this on, is going to speak for 10 minutes, and then other MPs can then join the debate for or against, and it will be debated. It's not in the main chamber of Parliament, it's not in the House of Commons, it's in a smaller hall, but nevertheless...
It doesn't matter, it's a very important step.
It's in Parliament, and if
absolutely.
we can get it debated, and if we get enough support behind it,
Yes.
then hopefully it will move forward.
Only MPs can take part in the debate. They sit round a horseshoe table in a committee room.
Right.
So after Nick Fletcher MP has spoken, everyone else that is there can have a say. That's why we want as many MPs as possible to be there. So we're asking people to go onto our website, which is owens-law.co.uk.
Wonderful, so they can do that.
You can then download a template letter, and you can also look up who is your MP. You need to write to your MP. You need to put your home address in so they can see that you're a constituent of theirs.
Of course,
and
yes.
ask them to attend this debate and support the motion. The motion is, as we've asked, for the law to be changed so that allergens in restaurants
Yes.
are presented in writing. That's all it is. So this motion would be presented. There'll be a debate. We're not too sure how long it will take place. It starts about 4:30 in the afternoon. So it's not in the main chamber. It's in this
Yes,
side
you
room.
were
the
saying, but it
committee
doesn't
room.
matter though, does it?
Yeah, no, it's
Doesn't
raising
matter.
the profile, and that's the important part. And at the end, a minister from DEFRA will have to give a response, and we're hoping, but if fingers crossed and
Yes.
everything else, that the minister will say, you know what, we'll take a look at this and we'll put it into law. We've been talking to the Food Standards Agency for the last...
Yes, I was going to ask you that
yes.
because obviously in the UK, Food Standards Agency are the people really we need to be addressing and talking to
Yeah.
and trying to...
And we've been talking to them for 2 years. We're talking to the CEO, the chair, the director of policy, all the top people. They are interested in doing it. They say they've got a lot on their plate, and at the moment they're saying they can't get onto this subject of Owen's Law. We do know that they've been to the Republic of Ireland, and we're going to meet them soon, we hope, and talk to them
Excellent.
about what the findings of their research into the Republic of
So I was going to say,
Ireland.
because you've done the, if it's happening in Ireland, why can they not just bring that module over to the UK?
Yep, copy
Absolutely.
and paste it.
Yes,
Yeah, well,
yes,
that's-
yes,
we're
almost, yes.
confident what's happened in Ireland has only helped to improve things.
Hmm.
It hasn't helped to confuse people. Restaurant operators are complying with the law, and people are safer for it. And if
Yes. Hmm.
they can do it there, why can't we do it here? It's not rocket science that we're asking for, really.
No.
But the debate on the 15th of May is all about that. So please, if people could look up the template letter on our website.
Which you've got, so it's not as
very,
if they,
very
yes,
easy.
it's very
It's
easy. You've made it very easy for
just
people,
fill in their
haven't you?
address and put their
Yes,
name and
yeah.
put their MP. So you can send it by email. You don't have to put a stamp on it
Yes,
anymore.
so yeah.
So you can find all that on the website.
That's lovely. And for you, Emma, it must be, you lost your brother. It must be, and it's obviously still emotional for you.
Yeah,
and
hugely
do you feel that you're gaining some ground now? Do you feel that you're actually, something's moving here?
Absolutely. And, I didn't just lose my brother. I was 16 when he was born, so we didn't have a standard sibling relationship. If anything, I kind of felt like an extra mother to him.
Yes.
I was very on hand to change nappies and to, my room was next door to his, so if he cried in the middle of the night as a baby, I
It was
woke
you.
up.
Yes,
I
yeah.
didn't necessarily go to him.
Yes.
But, I learnt how to be a mother he was like my prototype,
Yes,
my
that's right,
prototype
yes.
baby. And I think, he was only 9 years older than my son. So he was almost like a big brother to my children. And the loss for them and the loss for me of seeing that relationship grow and develop. And, I look at my son now who's 14 and, he's wearing some of Owen's old hand-me-downs and things like that. And they've got quite a similar face. And it's heartbreaking that Owen isn't in their lives and isn't in our lives anymore. So it's just so important that this doesn't happen to anyone else.
And I think that's the key, isn't it, for you, Paul? I mean, I've got to say, you know so much about the food law now, and I'm assuming you didn't know as much about things, you know, as legislation and the legalities.
We didn't need to know so much because Owen was well trained, and credit to his mother, she made sure he knew about his allergies, and he was not shy. But there are plenty of people who are shy.
Yes.
And there are plenty of people that perhaps don't take it seriously enough. So making it a law, to put it in writing, forces responsibility for the accuracy of that information further up, no pun intended, further up the food chain to the management, not leaving it to some young server who might only be 18 years old themselves.
Well, that's it. You know, we're talking here, and it's just making complete sense to myself and to you. Why is this not happening? But the fact is, it doesn't happen. So training would be an issue, wouldn't it? The restaurants would have to train their staff. You know, which is where, you know, there's so many other things that they could do though. But why do you think they're not, Emma?
I think it's a lack of resources, a lack of time, and a lack of understanding and education.
Understanding how severe an anaphylactic, yes.
It's as simple as that. It's a lot of that, and I think putting the, you know, we were saying about during the inquest, we were looking at, they were trying to find out who the server was that served Owen, and they weren't able to work out who it was because too much time had passed and they didn't keep the records. But at the same time, it's not really the server's problem. No. The server was going on their training.
It has to start from the top, doesn't it?
Exactly, and this law would basically sort out the accountability problem. You know, if you can't sort of police, if we were to put in law just that, oh, you must ask someone if they've got allergies, you must have a verbal conversation. You can't police that because, you know, people's memories aren't necessarily accurate. Oh yes, I definitely asked him. Oh no, you didn't. But
that's the problem with verbal.
Yes, but if it's in black and white on the face of the menu, there is no, you know, you can't have...
There's no quibble, is there, really? Yes. But it's interesting, you know, when you go out to restaurants, that some restaurants are really, really good. Yeah. And some restaurants have nothing in place. Zero.
We've got lots of examples of menus from big restaurants through to small mum and pop restaurants, and they can do it. And I've spoken to chefs who say, we can do it. It's not an impossible thing to do. I work in an industry where health and safety is paramount. What we do, if we injure someone or kill someone, it's terrible. We just can't operate. We have a very strong health and safety culture, and that needs to be taken on by the food industry, the restaurant industry. And it is a challenge, but it can be done. And it's, you know, certainly we don't think it's impossible to do. And I know some members of the catering trade might say, oh, well, that's going to be too difficult. What about this? What about that? But it needs to be done. And if it can be done in Ireland, why can't it be done here?
Yes,
that really is. It's as simple as that.
It's simple. As you say, you make it sound so simple. And for you, Emma, you know, what's your main goal for this? What would you absolutely like to see from this?
Obviously to have the law changed, but ultimately a reduction in the number of deaths, but also a reduction in the number of near misses, because that's something that isn't necessarily recorded quite as closely. Obviously a death is a much more catastrophic event, and so it gets a bit more attention, but there are so many near misses in the UK. We were contacted by someone quite recently whose infant son had a huge allergic reaction to some dairy in a restaurant, having told the server that they were had a dairy allergy, and the chef came out and reassured them that the dish they had ordered would be okay.
Oh my goodness.
But there was still dairy in that.
It's a subject. Yeah, it honestly, it's been so lovely for you to come in today. I'm afraid we've got to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining me. Thank you. Okay, come back and join me again in just a minute.
Hello and welcome back to the Monica Price Show. I'm now joined by Nick White, who is co-founder of this new app called INGREDIFIND. So let's find out a little bit more about it. So welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Now, it's been a show all about food, actually, because we've just had our guests on who were talking about OWEN'S LAW, who sadly lost their son to anaphylactic reaction to food. And this new app, now tell me about this new app, Nick, and how this all came about.
Well, I think it started with probably a not completely unrelated experience. My son Mark's girlfriend has a whole lot of allergies, and every time they go out to eat, that there is a lengthy conversation with the server as to what is and what is not in various dishes, to the point that they usually split up and Mark takes off half of Hannah's allergies. And Mark just got to the point, this is ridiculous. I'm spending a lot of time trying to get the information. It's not necessarily reliable. Does the waiter actually know the answer? Does he go back and ask the chef? Does the chef actually pay attention? All these things. So he came up with the idea of let's automate it. So over a number of years, he was kind of doing it in the background. But last year we were really focused. So we now have the app coming. The app is out. The basic version takes care of the 15 allergies that France takes.
Yes.
I think it's 9 in the US, 24 in Norway. So the numbers, all over the place.
It's different, isn't it, in each country? And that alone is
So we started off with, we'll just focus on these 15 allergies. But it was clear that really wasn't enough of the answer, because, for one, a lot of Hannah's allergies weren't in those 50. They were on top of the 50. And then we also looked and said, it's all well and good that you've got 10% of the population has allergies.
Yes.
A subset of those has serious allergies. I mean, I've got a mild allergy to oysters, but it just means an uncomfortable couple of days. It's not life-threatening. So we decided to not only do allergies, but also expand to cover food preference, so that if somebody's on a diet, whether it's to lose weight or because of other health concerns, they should avoid certain things or include certain things. So the current database, I think, marks now north of 1,600 ingredients, and every dish can be recorded down at that level, including what oil is used to cook in, so that somebody can filter a menu, either in the restaurant or on the app before going to the
I was going to say, that's a good thing about having the app, because you download the app. So let's put it in layman's terms. Say I was somebody with food allergies, I would download the app. I would then register, is that right?
You download, you create a profile, which is very straightforward.
Yes.
Part of that profile says, do you have
allergies
do you have any of these 15 allergies? Are you vegan, vegetarian, what have you? We're going to add more diets to that as well. And then you can literally go in and say, my diet, I want to eat salmon and avocado. I don't like the taste of feta, or I'm allergic to pineapple.
So it's as niche as that.
It's as detailed as you want to make it.
Okay.
And then you filter a menu, whether it's, as I said, the restaurant that you're at, or online because you're deciding what restaurant to go to.
Yes.
And the app will grey out any dishes that you shouldn't eat. It will show you in red wine if it's an allergen. It'll show you in green. It obviously won't be grey.
Yes.
But if it's something that you do want to eat, it'll show in green as to what it is. So then you have a complete knowledge of what you're going to.
So really, it's a bit, like Emma Paul was saying, when a waiter just, a person stands in front of them and says, oh yes, I think it's okay.
I think it's fine if it comes to me with oysters, because it's the worst case is I have a couple of uncomfortable. Think is not so good when it's a life-threatening allergy. That's
right, because some of the allergies, are very severe and cause someone to die. And other allergies are, like you were saying with oysters, where it's just an uncomfortable, couple of days.
Yes.
But so with the app, you build the profile, then how do the restaurants get at? Explain how the restaurants.
So the app is on your phone.
Right.
You've got your profile. You take your profile to any restaurant, and it just goes with it. The restaurant is providing us with the information.
So they sign up as well.
So they've signed up and said, yeah. Well, we literally, there's a process they go through. We set up the menu for them. They provide the ingredients, and the ingredients are entered, and then they're good to go. Down the line, we expect that we're going to start feeding some of this data back to the restaurants. So Mark and Hannah, for example, had one of their favorite restaurants when they were in uni was a place called Zuma in Boston. But they could never have a dessert, because all the desserts had nuts in them and has allergic to nuts. Literally the day before they left Boston, because they graduated, they went to the restaurant, and the waiter's coming around saying, can I interest you in dessert? And they say, well, no, because everything has nuts in it. And we said, oh, we actually got a new chef. We finally figured that out. And from our standpoint, you shouldn't be figuring it out after 4 years. We can provide you that data. And if we can tell a restaurant 35% of the people that eat in your restaurant are allergic to nuts, so you might want to have some desserts that don't have nuts in them. It's good for them. I mean, this potentially is a win-win. It's better information for the restaurant so that they can provide a better service, potentially increase their revenues as well, but also make a better experience for the diners because they can actually eat out knowing that they're actually safe.
And the diners will come back.
Yes.
The diners will come back to that restaurant because they feel safe in the knowledge that, they've gone through the process with yourself. And why do you think restaurants aren't doing this already, Nick?
I think if you're generous, you say they're very busy, they've had staff shortages with COVID and what have you. But fundamentally, what I've seen in practice is there are two groups. There's one set that just do not understand there is a problem. There's another set that understand that there's a problem, but trying to get them to prioritize it is hard. They move slowly. It's just like what Paul and Emma were saying. It's like there's an element of it, and you kind of wonder whether they care. And to be fair, in the end of the day, they're in a business, and what we're trying to do is to make that business for them easier.
It's about education, isn't it, as well? It's that understanding that it can be a severe, it might just be a mild reaction, but why really should we even tolerate a mild reaction in a restaurant?
Well, and I think the problem's becoming worse and worse.
Yes.
I mean, as you know, one of our ambassadors is Daniel, who's a Michelin chef in Norway. And talking to Daniel, it's like, it's pretty clear that 10 years ago, the problem was a lot less than it is now. Daniel was saying even 5 years ago, when Paul and Emma had the unfortunate issue with the situation with Owen, it wasn't as bad as it is now. It's getting worse. No one seems to know why.
Yeah, there's been many studies, and they're different, all sorts of things, sheltered illnesses, certain foods, just the food chain itself. We have so many preservatives and chemicals in our food now. But as you say, there's no real definitive answer.
Not that I've seen.
No.
But I know Hannah's gone through trying to find out what she can do, what might reduce the allergies, what make the reactions less. And she's had some foods that she's become allergic to, some foods that the allergies seems to have gone away, but no one seems to be able to explain it. So in the meantime, I think the restaurants need to start recognizing this is a problem that is not going to go away anytime soon.
Yes.
And they need to take it seriously.
I think as well, like you say, it's having that understanding with the restaurant. So it is about educating, it is about informing them, and hopefully with this app, you're going to take kind of that pressure away from them and do that for them.
The restaurants will realize that if you provide the information and you make people who do have allergies more comfortable, then they're more likely to eat out, which means that you will get more business. And I think the other thing that restaurants don't really focus on is if you have a group of 4 people and one person has allergies, who's dictating which restaurant you go to? It's only the allergies.
Yes.
Because the other people are not going to go, oh, we're going to go here even though it's going to kill you. I mean, obviously they're not going to.
No. We've got to take a quick break, but stay with us and come back and join us in just a minute. Welcome back to the show. As you probably are aware, if you've been listening to the show and joining us before, I'm with Nick White, who's co-founder of the new app called INGREDIFIND. Nick, it's very fascinating talking to you because there are many ways that restaurants, I should say, can inform us diners that about the allergens in their food, but it doesn't seem to be taken up, does it? Some do, some don't. There's no kind of consistency, is there? I think that's the word we would use.
Yeah, and I think I agree with Paul and Emma that the idea that it's not in writing in one form or another is, as far as I'm concerned, absurd. Because expecting a waiter to be able to remember it, or expecting somebody to be able to say, oh, did the waiter disclose it or not, it isn't the right answer.
And verbally as well, used to it verbally.
Yeah, precisely.
It can get misinterpreted, can't it?
Was it said or not?
Yes.
I mean, if you're in London, it's like, okay, how many foreign tourists are there whose maybe their English isn't so good, so we like to be able to protect them too.
Yes, absolutely.
But yes, I mean, ultimately, there are many ways you can do it. Some of them are more practical than others. So I think I think the solution probably depends on the type of restaurant. I mean, if you're a French bistro and you're providing steak and frites, there's not a lot to disclose. Yes, our steak and frites contains potatoes and beef.
Yes.
But not much else.
Yes.
If, on the other hand, you're an Indian restaurant and has 50 different ingredients to make a sauce, then it becomes quite complex.
Yes.
Particularly if you really want to disclose all of the details, and you potentially need to.
And have you had any personal experience, Nick, with restaurants where this has happened to you as a diner yourself?
I've had a couple. There's one Indian restaurant in London that has a really good allergy card. It just looks a bit like something that should be on the pyramids because it's got massive hieroglyphics, it's small print, and as the older you get, the more difficult it is to read.
An overload of information.
It's an envelope, but it's not even in a format that's particularly user-friendly. I've had another example where literally we've been talking to a restaurant about whether we could get them to join the platform. And they're very, very nice. I was thinking, oh, that sounds like a really good idea. We've got so much going on. We've just been doing this. We've just been doing that. We don't have the time to do it. That was from the owner. The waiter I actually know fairly well, so I've got some information from him. 4 hours after that discussion, they had 2 diners with the EpiPens out having allergic reactions.
Gosh.
4 days later, they still had no real interest in actually completing getting their restaurant on the app. But we'll enter the menu for you.
Yes.
Give us the ingredients. We'll set the ingredients up for you. All you need to do is to be able to provide the ingredients so that we can do it for you. And by the way, there's a law that requires you to have that information.
Yes, because we were talking before the break about the laws in the UK. Now, I appreciate it's different, and this app is a global app, so there's going to be different laws in different countries.
Right.
But, we're in the UK, so let's talk about the UK. There is a law, as, we've just discussed. Why do you think people still aren't doing it, Nick?
Ultimately, because they're not being policed to do it. I mean, as you said, there's a food inspector that comes around and says, where's your allergy card? And they say, we don't have one. And the food inspector says, you're closed until you have one. You can bet that there'll be lots of allergy menus available very quickly.
Now, what's the sort of feedback? Because you've just had a very successful launch, haven't you, in the Fairmont in Monte Carlo?
Yes.
How did that go?
I think it's going really well. I mean, the Fairmont themselves have been...
They've signed up, haven't they?
They've signed up. They started off with the lobby lounge. But there are various stages of bringing on all of the restaurants in the hotel. And I think in large part, it makes particular sense for someone like the Fairmont, who is in a heavy tourist traffic area. If you have a restaurant that's in a local area and mostly locals going back,
yes,
it's just less need. But if you're in a tourist area, particularly one where you've got people with lots of different language requirements, having that information just makes sense. It makes life easier for them. If somebody's going to have to spend 10 or 15 minutes with the waiter trying to figure out what's in the dish that they might or might not order, that's 15 minutes that the waiter is not doing something else. Why don't you just provide the information, let them look at it for themselves, and the waiter can get on with doing his job.
It's wonderful that you've got, it's launched and you've had this successful launch and restaurants are now giving you feedback, because I'm assuming that's what you need, don't you? You and Mark, who's the CEO.
The goal is, obviously, we want the feedback from the diners, from the restaurants. Mark's a bit of a perfectionist at the best of times.
He's the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if he gets feedback, he's redesigning.
That's good though, isn't
He's
it?
constantly reviewing, is this the best way for the diner to get the information? Is this the best way for the restaurant to get the information in, to get the restaurant information out? So, yeah.
And but all of that though will create this tool that people can use, and so you're fine tuning it as kind of the feedback that's coming in, and it's going to do different things as well.
Yes, I mean, I've spent 2 years in high tech.
Yes, because you're originally. Then tell us a bit about your background, Nick.
Well, the more pertinent part was I spent a year or two where my direct boss was Steve Jobs.
Right.
For the last 15, 20 years has mostly been in open source software.
Right.
And open source, for those people who aren't familiar with it, is basically you're giving away the software. There's no charge for the software, but then you upsell down the line by adding premium features.
Right, okay.
And we're using, it's not open source, but it's a similar approach. The app is free for diners. The restaurants can be up and running for free, and that, you know, because we don't want blocks. We want to get people using it in large part because Mark's really adamant and really focused that he doesn't want people having the experience that Paul and Ella have with Owen. Ultimately, there's two communities. We need to build a community of restaurants that use the app, but we need to build a community of diners, and the diners will force more restaurants. More restaurants will make it better for the diners. And in the meantime, what we intend to do is down the line, add premium features so that we can do things like telling the restaurant, you've got a lot of people who have nut allergies, that doesn't fit with your menu that has nuts in every dessert, because you're just losing your opportunity and people can't finish their meal.
Yes. I mean, us as diners, this is a fairly revolutionary app, so this is something that's quite unique. There's others on the market and there's loads of other ways of doing it, but yours is particularly unique because you're targeting the restaurants and the diners, and with all the different information they can create a profile.
When I look at it, I don't know any other way you can do it. We have friends saying, oh, you can do it without a restaurant. You can't do it without a restaurant. If I go to 5 different Indian restaurants and I order a butter chicken at each one, the ingredients are all the same. Yes, they all have chicken in it, but beyond that, what the specific spices are, they're going to vary. If I've got an allergy to one of them, I might have a massive allergic attack in one restaurant and not in another.
Yes.
So I think you have to get the detailed information from the restaurants to make it a solution that works. At least in the UK, the law says you have to have this information. We're just asking you to provide that information. If we really wanted to be difficult, we could send an army of people around to every restaurant and say, yeah, according to the law, you have to tell me what's in each of these dishes. I'm just going to sit here with a recorder. Until you don't.
Yes.
In other countries, the laws are different,
yes.
But I think it's going in the same direction. It's just that some countries are further ahead for one reason or another, and unfortunately, one of the reasons that some countries in the UK, I think is one of them, that is further ahead, is because of these unfortunate incidents where people have died.
Where people have died because of it.
And died completely unnecessarily.
So, last question to you. What's your hopes for INGREDIFIND? Where do you see it sort of in 5 years' time?
We want to have it in as many restaurants as possible. If it achieves that, we've achieved a lot. And that's the first focus.
Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for this show. Thank you so much for watching, and I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me today, and come back and join me again next week. Take care. Bye-bye for now.